You can tell everything you need to know about how a man feels in the first 5 seconds of seeing you, not from what he says, but from how he says it, how he stands, how his eyes change the moment you enter the room. It's not in the words, it's in the moment before the words, when instinct takes over and emotion tells the truth. When a man is truly emotionally invested in someone, one of the most subtle but powerful indicators of that investment is the kind of attention he gives. Attention in its raw form is a limited psychological resource. People do not casually direct it, at least not in ways that are sustained or meaningful. We are wired to filter out the noise of the world and focus only on what we deem valuable, what we subconsciously or consciously perceive as important to our survival, status, or fulfillment. So when a man greets you in a way that suggests he's entirely focused on you, when his body language shifts, when his eyes hold contact a moment longer, when his tone softens or warms up, what you are witnessing is a form of devotion. His nervous system is prioritizing you over everything else in that moment. That's not random, that's significant. In psychological terms, selective attention reflects internal hierarchies of value. A man doesn't look up from his phone, shift his tone, smile unexpectedly, or stand taller just for the sake of social courtesy. These are signs that something emotionally important is occurring within him. When his greeting seems to momentarily interrupt his routine, you are watching his brain recalibrate what matters right now. And you're at the top of that list. That's not flattery, that's neurology doing its job. The amygdala, responsible for emotional salience, is lighting up. His prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and social behavior, is attempting to regulate this spontaneous emotional surge. His whole system is activated by your presence, and it leaks through despite his best efforts to appear composed. This attention also manifests in physical orientation. If a man greets you by physically turning his whole body toward you, squaring his shoulders, and opening up his posture, he's signaling psychological openness and investment. People don't orient themselves fully toward others unless they feel safe or captivated. If he's fidgeting with his clothes, adjusting his hair, or suddenly hyper-aware of his presence, it's because your presence has disrupted his normal pattern of behavior. You're no longer a background figure in his environment, you've become the focal point. This kind of involuntary shift isn't just social instinct, it's emotional revelation. We don't alter our baseline behaviors for just anyone. That level of attunement means something deep has been triggered. It's also worth noting how often we overlook these signals because they appear so ordinary. But in evolutionary psychology, the ordinary is never meaningless. We are built to communicate our values and attachments in fleeting gestures and expressions. A man who is crazy about you cannot help but show it in the way he greets you. His eyes may light up faster than he realizes. His voice may betray a tremor of excitement or nervousness. He might say your name with more emphasis, even reverence. These aren't strategic, they're revealing. They're artifacts of internal desire surfacing without consent from the rational mind. This form of attention doesn't demand words to validate it. In fact, words often come later, if at all. The greeting becomes a silent declaration of priority, a nonverbal signal that he has already categorized you as important in his internal map of the world. People talk about love languages, but before love becomes articulate, it is attentive. It listens before it speaks. It watches. It notices before it acts. And when a man's greeting carries this type of attention, you are not witnessing charm. You are witnessing care. You are watching emotional reality break through the mask of social routine. That's not just how he says hello. That's who you are to him. Nonverbal communication is the primary language of human interaction. Before words are spoken, before any conscious thought is formulated, the body speaks. It tells the truth of a person's internal state, often more accurately than their words ever could. In the context of a greeting, especially one from a man who is emotionally affected by you, Nonverbal cues are not just accidental signals, they are deeply rooted expressions of hierarchy, value, and psychological orientation. When a man greets you in a certain way, the subtext is not merely about politeness. It is about what you represent to him in the structure of his internal world. Our nervous systems are designed to detect status and emotional relevance almost instantly. When a man interacts with someone he perceives as important, whether due to attraction, admiration, or emotional attachment, his nonverbal behavior shifts accordingly. This is not conscious performance. It's evolutionary biology in action. His shoulders may lift, his posture may straighten, and his chest might expand slightly. These are dominance displays, but not aggressive ones. They're attempts to signal presence, to take up more space in the hope of being perceived as competent, confident, and worthy. If you are the object of this shift, it is not random. He is elevating you in his psychological framework, and his body is unconsciously responding by trying to meet that standard. Eye contact is one of the most reliable indicators of emotional investment. A brief glance, a held stare, a look followed by a nervous smile. All these contain volumes of unspoken meaning. In evolutionary terms, prolonged eye contact signals trust, interest, and a willingness to be vulnerable. It is difficult to sustain if one feels threatened, indifferent, or disconnected. If a man looks at you longer than necessary when he greets you, if his pupils dilate or his expression softens, what you are observing is his internal hierarchy of value being revealed through his gaze. You matter more than most. His eyes can't help but rest on you. Tone of voice also shifts according to emotional state. A man may speak more gently, with a warmer cadence or a lowered pitch, when addressing someone he is emotionally drawn to. This change in tone is not always something he's aware of. In fact, the more emotionally genuine the interaction, the less likely it is that he's manipulating it. The voice reveals excitement, vulnerability, or anticipation in ways that words cannot cover up. The tone in a greeting, how he says your name, how his voice rises or falters, is often a clearer indicator of his feelings than the content of what he said. Micro-expressions, those fleeting facial movements that last only a fraction of a second, are also worth noting. A raised eyebrow, a flash of a smile, a quick intake of breath. These are signs that emotion is being processed in real time. They occur before the brain can construct a deliberate response. In the moment of greeting, these expressions leak the truth. They say, "I care," or "you affect me," without the speaker even knowing it. They bypass social masks and expose raw emotional material. These nonverbal behaviors together form a kind of code, a language of the body that bypasses the rational mind and speaks directly from one nervous system to another. We pick up on them intuitively, even if we don't always consciously register what they mean. When a man greets you in a way that carries all these signals, when his posture shifts, his eyes soften, his voice warms, his expressions flash unpredictably, you are witnessing a disclosure of inner psychological structure. You have been placed in a position of emotional priority, and his body is telling you so without needing permission from his intellect. Human behavior becomes most revealing when it is under the influence of strong emotion. In those moments, the carefully constructed filters of social conditioning begin to falter, and something deeper emerges. A man who is emotionally neutral can maintain a facade. He can play it cool, stay calculated, follow the script. But a man who is genuinely affected by someone who is, for lack of a better word, crazy about her, starts to behave in ways that exceed the reach of rational control. The greeting, something typically mundane, becomes charged with meaning. Every movement, every hesitation, every alteration in speech or tone is a signal from beneath the surface. Emotion breaks through structure. That's where the truth lives. You see this when a man greets someone and suddenly seems different. He may stumble over his words, not because he lacks intelligence or eloquence, but because his brain is competing with his emotional system for control of his expression. Language in those moments becomes unstable. He might repeat himself, speak too quickly, or say something unnecessary. These aren't signs of weakness, they're indications that his rational mind is no longer operating in isolation. It is being interrupted by emotional arousal. The part of him that wants to stay composed is being challenged by the part of him that is emotionally exposed. That conflict produces these micro breakdowns in normal communication. There's also a visible shift in bodily behavior. A man under the influence of genuine emotion might fidget more than usual, adjusting his collar, touching his face, shifting his weight. These actions aren't rehearsed, they're coping mechanisms. They reflect the physiological response to internal tension, a kind of emotional static that the body tries to discharge through movement. His heart rate might be slightly elevated, his breathing just a bit uneven. His body is responding as though something significant is at stake. And his sense of self is temporarily being reoriented around your presence. Emotions affect the nervous system in profound ways, and the greeting becomes the stage upon which these effects are first played out. In fact, the initial moments of contact often reveal more than hours of conversation. When a man sees someone he deeply cares about, his facial muscles behave differently. The smile he gives isn't generic. It emerges spontaneously, often asymmetrically, with genuine emotion reflected in the eyes. That kind of smile, what psychologists call a Duchenne smile, is nearly impossible to fake. It is the body telling the truth before the mind has a chance to lie. Another telling sign is the delay in returning to baseline. After the greeting ends, does he linger emotionally? Does he seem slightly distracted or disoriented? This is a consequence of emotional flooding, the after effects of intense internal response. His cognitive system takes time to return to normal functioning because it was momentarily overridden by a surge of feelings. It's not drama, it's biology. When someone has that kind of impact on a man, it shows up whether he wants it to or not. All of these behaviors, verbal slips, nervous laughter, altered posture, involuntary smiles, are not accidents. They are evidence of an internal shift. A man doesn't act this way for everyone. He reserves this type of disorganization, this brief collapse of rational order, for people who affect him deeply. And the greeting is where you'll see it first, the ritual moment when he goes from fine to emotionally unguarded. That moment of interaction, stripped of its predictability, reveals a kind of truth that logic alone cannot manufacture. It is the truth of emotional attachment manifesting in real time, without permission, without rehearsal. When a man allows himself to be emotionally transparent in the very first moments of a greeting, he is engaging in an act of voluntary vulnerability, and that act carries immense psychological weight. Vulnerability, especially in men, is not something that occurs by accident. It is a conscious or unconscious decision to lower defenses in a world that often expects those defenses to remain firmly in place. Masculine social conditioning teaches self-containment, stoicism, emotional restraint. So when a man steps outside of that frame, even briefly, especially in a simple greeting, it signals a kind of emotional risk-taking. It means the person he is greeting has a level of emotional importance that justifies that risk. The moment of greeting is more than a formality. It's the psychological threshold where the internal meets the external. If a man greets you with a sudden shift in demeanor, if his face softens, if his voice warms, if there's a visible tenderness or reverence in how he addresses you, that is not performative. That is his emotional armor bending under pressure. It's a small but significant act of disclosure, often unconscious, that he is not merely interacting with another person. He is interacting with someone who has the power to affect him. And when he allows that reality to surface without immediately covering it up with humor, indifference, or distance, he is inviting exposure. That invitation is vulnerability. Vulnerability, when it is freely chosen, always implies investment. People do not risk being seen unless they care about the outcome. A man who is ambivalent or emotionally disengaged has no reason to soften when he greets someone. He maintains the social mask because nothing beneath it is threatened. But when a man is emotionally invested, when he desires closeness, connection, or intimacy, he will, at times, unintentionally reveal parts of himself that he usually keeps hidden. And the greeting becomes the first and most immediate place where that breach occurs. This might show up in the way he uses your name. Names are deeply personal. If he speaks it with warmth, familiarity, or even reverence, that's not accidental. That is the voice of someone emotionally charged. He's not just saying hello. He's communicating a feeling through the way he acknowledges your identity. There's a subtle but unmistakable intimacy in how a man says the name of someone he deeply cares about. The pacing changes. The intonation carries emotional color. The name becomes a vessel for sentiment. There's also the matter of eye contact during that moment. If he holds your gaze even for a fraction of a second longer than normal, it's because something in him is reaching for recognition. Eye contact under vulnerability is not about dominance or control. It's about permission. He is silently asking to be seen, not just looked at. And in that look is a kind of emotional exposure that transcends surface level interaction. He is letting you into his psychological space, not with grand gestures, but with small, nearly invisible openings. And then there are those moments when he seems unsure, hesitant, caught between saying more and holding back. This tension, this internal tug of war, is often a sign that something unspoken is trying to emerge, but is still held in check by fear, uncertainty, or a need for emotional safety. That hesitation itself is a form of vulnerability. It reflects a man who wants to say more, who feels more than he believes he should show, but still lets just enough emotion slip through that it becomes evident to someone who's paying attention. All of this happens in seconds, often without words, but it matters. A man's decision to let his guard down, even slightly, in the very first moment of a greeting is not a trivial thing. It is a message from the deepest part of himself. It is a signal that he is willing to be seen, not just in the social sense, but in the emotional sense. He may not call it love or even attraction, but the behavior speaks first. Vulnerability always speaks first, long before the mind can catch up. Intensity in human interaction can be misleading if it's isolated to a single moment. Anyone can be passionate once, charming for a moment, or enthusiastic when the mood strikes. What truly reveals emotional depth, consistency, is not incidental. It reflects a deeper motivational system at work. Human behavior is shaped by habits, and emotional attachment is no exception. A man who is crazy about someone doesn't rely solely on grand gestures to communicate it. Instead, his affection seeps into the ordinary. He lights up when he sees you, not just the first time, but the 10th, the 50th, the 100th. That continuity of emotional response cannot be faked over time. It speaks to a feeling that is woven into his perception of you. You are not just another person in his environment. You are a fixed point of emotional resonance, and that becomes visible in how predictably he reacts to your presence. People don't maintain emotional energy for long unless it's backed by something meaningful. Surface level attraction burns out quickly when it lacks emotional depth. But if a man consistently shows signs of excitement, warmth, or even subtle nervousness every time he greets you, even after the novelty is worn off, it indicates that you occupy a stable, elevated position in his emotional world. This isn't about romantic idealization. It's about emotional durability. His consistent reaction reveals that what he feels isn't just a passing mood. It's a stable orientation toward you. There's also a neurological component to this repetition. When we emotionally invest in someone, their presence activates reward systems in the brain. Dopamine, oxytocin, and other neurochemicals shape how we respond to that person over time. If a man's greeting is reliably marked by warmth or joy, His brain has likely linked your presence with positive emotional states. This pairing becomes reinforced through repetition, creating a feedback loop. Excellent. The more he sees you, the more that emotional pattern is strengthened. So even when he's tired, distracted, or stressed, his greeting may still carry that spark because it's no longer a performance. It's a conditioned emotional response. This consistency also builds trust. When someone greets you with the same level of care and attentiveness each time, it sends the message that their feelings are stable, not erratic. You learn that their emotional engagement isn't dependent on circumstance, convenience, or fleeting passion. It's reliable. That reliability is one of the clearest indicators of emotional sincerity. A man who greets you enthusiastically only when he feels good, or only when others are watching, is communicating conditional interest. A man who greets you with the same emotional authenticity when no one's around, when he's had a hard day, or when there's nothing to gain, he's revealing something truer. He's showing that his feelings are not situational, they are structural. Inconsistency often signals ambivalence. But when someone's emotional expression is sustained and repeated across time, it reflects a deeper integration of that person into their psychological framework. The greeting, as mundane as it may seem, becomes a barometer of that integration. If a man's face softens every time he sees you, if his voice lifts the same way even after countless interactions, that repetition is not accidental. It's the behavioral signature of someone who feels more than he says, and who shows it not just once, but always. Human beings are driven by patterns, internal maps that guide their social behavior, their emotional priorities, and their instinctive responses to others. When a man places someone at the center of that internal map, his behavior adjusts accordingly, not always consciously, but reliably. One of the most telling signs of that internal restructuring is how he reacts to your presence even before words are exchanged. His greeting is not just a social formality. It is often a reflexive release of emotional tension that has been building beneath the surface. When his response to seeing you is immediate, unfiltered, and emotionally charged, it reveals something fundamental. He's not preparing to act emotionally. He already is. Anticipation plays a huge role here. A man who is deeply invested in importance, his heart rate may quicken, his breathing may deepen. And when you finally do appear, his reaction unfolds as a kind of emotional exhale. The smile, the warmth in his tone, the quickness in his steps. These aren't conjured up after he sees you. They've been waiting just beneath the surface, ready to emerge. In this context, the greeting becomes a release valve for stored emotional energy. A man who feels deeply may not be in constant expression of his feelings throughout the day, but that doesn't mean those feelings aren't active. They are simmering, shaping how he moves through his environment, influencing what he notices and altering what he expects. When he sees you, that stored emotional charge finds its outlet. His response may be subtle or overt, but it's rarely neutral. That emotional buildup, once released, often results in behaviors that look spontaneous: an impulsive smile, a surprising compliment, a sudden softness in the voice. These are not rehearsed, they are emotional reflexes, and they reveal far more than any deliberate gesture. Sometimes this emotional charge causes minor disruptions in his usual rhythm. A man who is otherwise composed might become momentarily clumsy. He may drop something, forget what he was saying, or suddenly change his posture. These slips are not signs of weakness or lack of confidence. They are evidence that your presence affects his nervous system in real time. His cognitive bandwidth is being partially redirected toward processing the emotion he feels in your presence. This is not just psychological, it's physiological. The body is revealing what the mind has not yet articulated. And this release isn't dependent on whether he intended to greet you a certain way. In fact, some of the clearest indicators of emotional depth occur when a man tries to act casual but can't. His intended indifference is interrupted by a smile that comes too quickly, a tone of voice that's too warm, a glance that lingers just a little longer than it should. These moments of contradiction are revealing. They indicate that his inner world and outer presentation are misaligned, because emotion is breaking through the behavioral filter even after the greeting. The residue of that emotional release may remain. He may appear more energized, more relaxed, or paradoxically more anxious. This after effect is the result of emotional energy being acknowledged, even if only momentarily. The greeting may seem simple from the outside, but on the inside, it's the culmination of anticipation, emotional focus, and the involuntary need to connect. That kind of greeting doesn't come from politeness. It comes from priority. When a man greets you in a way that defies routine, when his voice softens, his posture shifts, his gaze lingers, and his emotional state visibly responds to your presence, you are not witnessing coincidence or charm. You are witnessing an emotional system in motion, revealing what words may never fully convey.